In this video today, we're going to talk about what to do after a kingpin flip. Sometimes your car may not handle as good as it did prior to the flip. Do not get discouraged. You're still on the right track. Some things have been corrected that were masking issues that you didn't know the car had. Don't be discouraged. I know some people do the flip and then go, oh, the car handled better before. Well, it may have, but it was never going to be right for anything more than a stock motor. We'll start off with a few things that can happen with the car. Let me get a pointer real quick. I'm back. There's some things that happen after the kingpin flip or just having the ball joints freed up. Now that the suspension can move, where if it previously could not move, the wheel was fixed in position and could not be deflected in any way because the chassis was frozen, the ball joints anyway. Now that it can move, it can create problems. One of the things, the first one you may notice, is that when the car is compressing the suspension, maybe going over a bump, maybe into a corner, what can happen is the tire can go up and make physical contact with the underside of the body. And the way I check this is I'll turn the wheel fully to the left and push up. If the wheel can't turn, I purposely put a larger diameter tire on it just to make sure that it contacted the body, but clearly it's hitting. The second that tire hits the underside of the car, the wheel will stop and the car will flip, or not flip, but spin violently. And it may happen at a very low speed, just whatever slight pressure it needs to contact the body, the spin will occur. Another thing that I've noticed, sometimes it'll drive weird because the tire, suppose it'll turn fine one way, and then you go to turn the other way and it won't get a full turn, and then it may pop through. One thing to look for is if you're running a higher profile tire, newer tires, or a wider offset on your car, look at the back of the wheel arch. Is the tire itself making contact with the wheel arch? There's ways to fix that. You could either take a Dremel out and just widen it a little bit, or you could use a lower profile tire. They are available, and I don't know if you can see the difference there, but it's quite a bit lower profile. I'd say probably at least 1.5 millimeters, and sometimes on a car that small, that's all you need in order to make the clearance. Another thing you'll be able to notice is the offset. Wheel offset is the amount of this. I'm pointing at the hub here, and it's the difference between the edge of the rim and where it actually mounts onto the car. And in this case, this is a 3 millimeter offset. Other cars I have maybe a 1 millimeter offset. And let me see if I can pull one up here. This wheel has a very shallow one. That's only 1 millimeter from the edge of the rim to the outer edge of this wheel itself. And what that'll do is it will pull the tire more inward towards the car because it's not being held out away from the car as much. So you could see that it would not have nearly the amount of bump out. And that'll solve problems in the rear of the car. A lot of times, even brand new cars, you'll see the edge of the wheel, when it is deflected, will actually catch the underside right here of the body. And if that happens, it will spin the car from the rear. Most of the time, if the car spins out, it's happening from the front end, and it's just something happening that causes the energy of the car to pivot around one point. If you're driving an R8 or a McLaren P1, they do have a lot of body clearance issues with the front wheels. They strike the wheel arch, they strike the underside where the headlight buckets glue into the car. The McLarens are 12C are pretty flat, but on the Audi, there's quite a bit of material here that will, even on a brand new car, get into the tire if the tire is a very tall tire at all. A lot of cars, McLarens, work better once the tires are worn out, and that's just because it's no longer striking the body because the tire's been ground down. You can take a Dremel tool and grind some of that material away without affecting the appearance of the headlight itself. Another thing I've noticed, if you have a, especially I've noticed it on several R8s, the headlight assembly that glues into the body, there's a hole here, and this glues up from the bottom. I've got black glue on mine just to show you how I glued that in. Make sure that's flush if you have an R8 in particular. The P1 can be the same way. On the R8, sometimes it'll rub in here on the body itself. That's more of a problem, and the only way to really fix that is lower profile tire or increase the spring rate. A stiffer spring will allow less deflection on the wheel. It won't travel as far with a given amount of force, and it just has a greater resistance, and that will keep it away from the body. You can Dremel it a little bit. Be careful because it's a weak body. If you have the older style R8s, some of them are weak and they're fragile, and you actually create a weak spot for it to basically shatter in a crash. But like I said, Dremeling it is an option to get rid of some of that material for full deflection. And I check it when I put new tires on a car, especially tires I've never used before. I'll check it full to the right, full to the left, both directions, and make sure that it clears. Now you can see here, this one is not clearing. It's got a wider offset wheel, and it is actually striking the back of the wheel arch. It's a taller tire. This is a very thick tire as well, and it's for purposes of the video. But this is a more normal low profile tire. There's plenty of clearance in here. It won't strike the body, and I can turn it fully and in either direction, and the tire will still turn. Now there will be, if you compress it hard enough, you'll eventually hit the body on almost all cars. You have to think about how much is it actually being compressed in a turn, and you'll know if it's hitting the body, it's an instant spin out. But there's some other things that can cause the problems. Let's see, I've seen people have issues when their lug nuts are too tight and the wheel's not free spinning. It will cause spin outs, and it's amazing. The cars come from the factory with pretty tight lug nuts on them. Another thing can be the axle in this area right here where it goes through the rim can get wrapped in hair, and that produces quite a bit of drag on whatever wheel it happens to be, and that can cause spinning as well. So just to recap some corrective actions, you can use a stiffer spring to sort of get rid of some of the motion. You can use a lower profile tire. You can use a shorter offset. It brings the wheel in, and generally when the wheels go in, they have a bit more clearance because the outside of the wheel arch generally tapers towards the tire. A millimeter inside gives you quite a bit more clearance. You can use a Dremel tool to increase the clearance. Be careful with that. Check your hair, check your axles for hair, and check the lug nuts are not too tight. There's several other things that can cause spinning, but those are the major ones that I've seen. Hope that helps you. You're still on the right track, even if it didn't work out the way you wanted. And we'll see you at the track.